Hey everyone, for this video I wanted to talk about Halo Wars 2. And while I love Halo Wars 2, I really do not like the Halo Wars 2 campaign. I want to talk about in this video why the Halo Wars 2 campaign is so forgettable. It seems like I've played through this campaign now 2 or 3 times, and if you were to ask me what happens in the second or third acts of this game, I honestly couldn't tell you. I think that Halo Wars 2 overall is a step down in the quality of the campaign from Halo Wars 1. In this video, I'm going to break down why I think that that is. When Halo Wars 2 opens up, it actually has one of the strongest first acts in really the entire Halo series, in my opinion. It picks up right where it left off in Halo Wars 1 with Serena's line from the Halo Wars 1 legendary ending, where she says, "Captain, wake up, something has happened." It uses the beautiful blur cutscenes that we were introduced to in Halo Wars 1. That continues here in Halo Wars 2. The music was so great in the beginning. It pays respects to Sergeant Forge. You're hearing the last words of Serena as she slips into rampancy. Again, the blur cutscenes are just so good in the opening of Halo Wars 2. We get to see a new model of Captain Cutter. For whatever reason, they redesigned how Captain Cutter looks for Halo Wars 2. I guess that may coincide with a different voice actor. That might be a small gripe I think some people have with that, but that doesn't really bother me. And we get to see the Spirit of Fire arrive at the Ark after 28 years or so when they were lost in space. It introduces Isabel once they land on the Ark, and shortly thereafter, we get the introduction of the Banished and Atriox. And it was just so cool, such a different tone that we had never seen in Halo before, setting up this character that was so ruthless and evil and strong and taking on the Spartans and really destroying all of Red Team in that cutscene was just so awesome. And I remember the first time playing that was really taken back, and I was like, wow, this is going to be an epic campaign. And unfortunately, that's kind of the high point of the Halo Wars 2 campaign, is probably in the first 30 minutes to 1 hour. I think in its second and third act, it really falls flat. The cutscenes largely from the opening of Halo Wars 2 towards the end, I know there's some blur cutscenes mixed in, but they're few and far in between. The in-engine cutscenes really just don't do it justice as much as they did with the Halo Wars 1 in-engine cutscenes. And it's really kind of hard to describe this, but I think the feel and the look and the design of the in-engine cutscenes of Halo Wars 1 were a little bit better suited for the environments that we saw Red Team and the Spirit of Fire in compared to what we see in Halo Wars 2. The mission design in Halo Wars 2 is largely forgettable, like much of the campaign, and I think that's what contributes to a lot of this campaign overall being forgettable. It really seems like there's not a whole lot of purpose as to why you're doing what you're doing in some of these missions. I personally feel like the missions have too much fluff in them. Reinforcements show up here, there's a timer that's set over there, and once you start making your way through these maps, the glassing beams are added to increase the difficulty of some of these missions. And I also think that a lot of these mission designs are more or less ripped from what we see in Halo Wars 1, except they don't really elevate the excitement or the originality that we saw from Halo Wars 1. It kind of is like that Halo Wars 1 left a blueprint of mission design for Halo Wars 2, and instead of Halo Wars 2 implementing new features, new mechanics, or new mission objectives, instead of reinventing the excitement of these mission designs from Halo Wars 1, it kind of just continued them without adding anything different in Halo Wars 2. And I think that's kind of really largely where I think this campaign kind of falls flat, is it didn't really elevate something that we had never seen before compared to what we saw in Halo Wars 1. This may be different for those who have never played Halo Wars 1 and they dove straight into Halo Wars 2, but I can only tell you my experience because I was there for both Halo Wars 1 and Halo Wars 2. I also do not understand why Creative Assembly did this in the campaign design, but it really bugged me playing back Halo Wars 2 on Legendary last year is there are glassing beams all over the place throughout the campaign without any rhyme or reason, largely. They will beam your base, destroy your buildings. You'll lose all of your units if you're not paying attention. They can beam you through fog of war, and there's no explanation or warning, and seemingly no cooldown timer either. Sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 glassing beams dropped all in the same spot, and you really have to split your units, and the beams will chase all the different units that you have split. I mean, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. I think it's added to increase the difficulty, and this is the only thing that they could think of that would increase the difficulty. But the only thing it does is increase your frustration. You know, when you're playing against these really, I think the Legendary of Halo Wars 2 is actually quite more difficult than in Halo Wars 1. And there are some times where it takes quite a while to get resources because you have limited buildings or supply pads, and you lose your entire army in a couple of seconds due to a glassing beam. And if you take the perspective of your average casual RTS player, someone who's not going to be paying attention to their units at all times, I can imagine this being incredibly frustrating, losing all of your units over and over and over again due to glassing beams that the game really does not warn you about prior unless you're staring at your units. You can see the windup. There's really nothing else to warn you. In Halo Wars 1, in skirmish mode, you would have AIs tell you that an enemy attack was coming here. They forgot to do this. They're focusing on that. That'd be cool to see in Halo Wars 2 campaign, but that's pretty much absent. And so I think that just adds to the frustration of players. In terms of how the campaign ends, I'm not going to spoil the Halo Wars 2 campaign and how the story ends. I will say it does end on a cliffhanger. And there are 2 things with this. One isn't Halo Wars 2's fault. The other one is. The one that's not Halo Wars 2's fault is Halo Infinite does not pick up this storyline, despite Halo Infinite continuing the conflict between the UNSC and the Banished and Atriox. It does nothing to kind of connect the dots between the ending of Halo Wars 2 and the beginning of Halo Infinite. And while that's not Halo Wars 2's fault, the additional storyline, Awakening the Nightmare, I would say more or less maybe is Halo Wars 2's fault for not continuing the storyline there. I completely understand that that DLC and that expansion is designed to follow the Banished and how they interact with the Flood conflict. But I would have loved to have at least seen something talk about the end of Halo Wars 2 and how that story continues. It's still kind of hanging out in where it has been left off. I know there are a couple of novels that may touch on the ending of Halo Wars 2 just a little bit, but we really do need either a third game in the series or something in a mainline Halo game that will continue or wrap up what we saw in Halo Wars 2, or maybe they won't, given the ending of Halo 5, how they kind of just forgot about that and wrapped it up in one of those damn books. The point is, to wrap up the end of this video, is I felt like Halo Wars 1 had so many memorable missions: Alpha Base, Arcadia City, Scarab, the various Flood missions, so on and so forth. They all had a different design with different objectives and a different purpose, is really what you felt. You could understand the purpose in each of these missions. And I feel like Halo Wars 2 doesn't quite hit the same highs that Halo Wars 1 does in its mission design and, again, the purpose of those missions. Despite its grand opening, I think Halo Wars 2 falls flat after about an hour in. Again, it has one of the best openings in all of Halo, and then it seemingly cannot build up any more excitement with the lack of unique mission design and the lack of a true ending to the game. However, if you've never played the Halo Wars 2 campaign, I still think you should, to kind of give you an introduction to the Banished. Maybe you've already played Halo Infinite, you want to see how the UNSC combated the Banished on the Ark. That might be something worth your time. And again, some of the additional storylines that are added in DLC, Awakening the Nightmare and Operation Spiritbreaker, are quite well received, and I do like those campaigns, so you could try those as well. There is a lot of single-player content in Halo Wars 2, but maybe sometimes quantity does not equal quality. And of course, you should play the Halo Wars 1 campaign if you have not already. All right, well, that's going to do it for my thoughts. I passed the question on to you. What are your thoughts on the Halo Wars 2 campaign? Do you think it's largely forgettable? Do you think the mission design is good? Do you think the mission design is bad? And how do you want to see this story wrapped up? Do you want to see it wrapped up in a mainline Halo game, a Halo novel, or a Halo Wars 3? Hopefully that'll happen eventually. Love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Well, if this is your first time here on the channel here at TeamRespawn, we love Halo Wars, and we post Halo Wars videos all the time, so check out the channel for more Halo Wars content. All right, that's going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you, James.